Record. Hi, my name is Jeannine Vegh, and with me today is...
Hi, I'm Ellen Seigel.
Okay, and so today we're going to do a talk about intuition. And so I'm going to read just a sentence out of a post that came from Daily Om yesterday, and it was called Silence. And so the sentence says, "Silence is the void where we can hear the many sounds that we often ignore, the voice of our intuition telling us the truth." And I thought that was a good way to get started. So do you want to say anything about that, Ellen?
Well, intuition, and we can talk about this. I think of intuition as a clear direction or of a certain understanding, a clear choice, an inner knowing. And for people who consider themselves spiritual, that still small voice inside. Mm-hmm. And I think there are many other innate direction, your natural inclination. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different names for it. And one of the things I think about as it's like in us, and it's available to us, and maybe our level of awareness determines whether we access it or not. And I also associate the terms conscious use of it, and maybe when we're, I would say, less mature, and that doesn't mean older or younger, that we may be guided by it unconsciously. So those are just some of the thoughts that came to me when we chose this topic. So wherever we go with any of it, we'll see.
Yeah. And how it works for me is when I was reading that sentence yesterday and hearing that, I was thinking about, as you know, I've begun to do a practice in centering prayer for the last couple of months, and I've done meditation my entire life. But to me, this felt like more of an advanced level of meditation. And if people aren't sure what centering prayer is, it's something that came from a book called The Cloud of Unknowing, which was written by an unknown teacher. I'm assuming a monk or a priest, however the right way is to say that. And then Father Thomas Keating explains it a little bit more. But I was hearing about it on Insight Timer through Methods and Maria Gollo. And so I decided to accept the challenge. And so for 2 times a day, I sit in silence or prayer for 20 minutes. I'm not praying, I'm just sitting in silence. And so you're not supposed to be using that time is just really meant to be silence. So things come into my head, the ego works every once in a while. But where the intuition seems to happen is outside of that silence. So throughout the day, I'm finding my intuition, my intuitive wisdom is getting stronger and stronger from doing this practice. And it's getting stronger also because I'm listening to it and I'm paying attention to it. And that's the difference between intuition and ego, is that the difference is that when you're strengthening your intuition, you're going to be listening more to your higher wisdom than if you are to just be focused on your ego, which we talked about last time.
Right.
So I'm going too much on this, so I'm going to let you take over from there.
Well, each thing is a jumping off point.
Exactly.
in the Be Happy No Matter What material,
Mhm.
it gets you in touch with that you have an intuition or an inner voice. And sometimes it can even give you concrete direction, like get up now, brush your teeth now,
Yeah.
make a right turn here, don't make a turn there.
Mhm.
And how often, I'll say in my life, I would get a thought, a direction, and go, I'll do it this way.
Mhm.
And later on, appreciated, if I had done what my inner wisdom had suggested, things would have been much more streamlined and efficient in getting to my goals, whatever they were.
Exactly.
So,
Because you don't know what the reason is why your intuitive wisdom is saying go right.
yes.
And we want to contradict that because in our head, we already had it mapped out that I wanted to go left.
Mm.
Our ego was so set on, no, but this is the best way to get to this particular location. But the ego is telling you to go, the intuition is telling you to go right. And you've got to trust that ultimately, because there's a reason why you're being guided there. Right. And even like when you said just a minute ago, I wake up, I'm hearing wake up and brush your teeth. It could be because it's like the universe is saying, wake up your consciousness, Ellen, because there's something I want you to see in 10 minutes when you're going to look out your window. Whereas if you would have slept in, you wouldn't have seen that thing out of the window because you slept in and said, I don't want to see it. And that could have been this moment when the most beautiful sunrise or the most beautiful bird just happened to be sitting there on your tree outside of your window or something along those lines. But it could also be that your help was needed and you saw something across the street. And you wouldn't have seen that if you wouldn't have paid attention to your wisdom telling you, wake up, Ellen, you need to brush your teeth. And that would have caused you to look out the window.
So have you found, because I've found this, that as you were saying before, the more I have become open to following that direction, I'm going to say the more interesting, I like things before, but it's like being on an adventure that you can become very curious about and interested in, like,
Absolutely.
I wonder what I'll be guided to today, or
Exactly.
whose path I'm going to cross, and what awarenesses I'm going to have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a beautiful thing that you brought up.
Yeah. Well, the ego it's trying so hard to fight for control. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to share a little bit about the picture that's behind me. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me bring this up here. This picture that's behind me, it's the Botticelli's Birth of Venus. And I love this picture. So I put it behind me because despite whatever you've heard about this painting, what I'm going to say about it is that I saw the Venus as as intuition. She's raw, she's naked, she's right there. And on the right and the left, you have the ego trying to take control of the situation. So one side is trying to put a coat around her, a cloak around her, and the other side is blowing wind on her to make her cold. So she's thinking she needs that coat. That's what I was thinking when I saw this morning. And I was thinking that we get this intuitive thought that comes up for us, but then something is trying to control that thought. So, we want to put the cloak on, or because we feel it's too cold outside. But something is telling us, no, just walk out the door. You're needed to walk out the door right this minute.
One of the things that occurs to me is that when many of us are children, we follow the direction of the adults, the hopefully caring and concerned adults who have some consciousness. But, as generations back further, my hunch is that less and less self-awareness, less and less consciousness about the impact of what we as adults put out onto children. And as children, we've taken on the outside direction, and some of us were even directed away from our inner selves.
Yeah.
When a child says, what were you and daddy fighting about? And the parent says, oh, no, we weren't fighting.
Yeah.
And the child walks away going, oh, I guess they weren't fighting and I was wrong. And you have enough of those things piling up that what comes to us as children, we really learn to disregard.
Yes.
And I guess with myself and friends and people that I've worked with, to recover in ourselves, to appreciate that we have that inner wisdom. And some of us have needed to peel off the layers of our own self-judgment and limiting conclusions about ourselves in order to appreciate that, use the term centered, that we are centered in here. And yes, maybe in a spiritual sense, we're part of a greater whole and we're all one. Nevertheless, we are behind the viewfinder here, and this one here, and that we have impressions and responses and direction coming from within us actually all the time. And we ultimately get to choose how to apply what's coming up through us. And to see it with the insight that you drew to it before about, with wonderment, like, I could choose to pull the covers over my head and miss a beautiful sunrise.
Right.
Things like that, and other things in that along those lines.
And you know what else, Helen? You just made me think of something else when you brought up children is, imagine the Venus as a child. She's just been born. And as the child grows, when they see things from a different perspective than an adult does. So the child is, I remember when I was a child and examining dreams, and I would wake up and talk about my dreams, but I realized, and this is where the cloak or the wind is coming, if you see the right and the left side of the painting as your parents, symbolic of the parents, it was when I would talk about those dreams or some sort of intuitive wisdom that I would have, and adults would be saying to me, oh, that's cute. Or, well, dreams are just dreams. It's just something that you do in the nighttime, or something, they wouldn't, when you're not given any kind of supportive wisdom on what the dream is all about, or somebody listening to you and saying, tell me more about that dream, then some people could just say, or some children might say to themselves, oh, well, that's stupid. it's just a dream. And that might be where it goes for them. And then as they grow up, they just continue to ignore these things. And then the dreams disappear, or they take on no meaning for the child. The same thing with, gut feelings or things like that, like a survivor of abuse and a child learns, don't tell, because the parents aren't going to listen anyway, or because they've heard positive things stated about that particular perpetrator. And so they've learned, well, everybody looks at them a certain way. So I was bringing that up now for myself, just to end this conversation. For myself, what I didn't allow this to stop me from dreaming or trusting my intuitive wisdom. I just learned as a child that for some reason, adults don't understand these things. And so I didn't stop paying attention to my dreams. I just stopped speaking out loud about them. And if I had any kind of intuitive wisdom or thoughts about things, I just stopped talking to people about it. And in fact, it wasn't until I became an adult and moved to California where I began to be around people who talked about the same things I was talking about, that I finally started saying, oh yeah, I do that too. I dream too.
You brought up something that I think is not talked about enough. And that is that inner life that, and I identify with this too, that, well, I'm not going to talk about this because, they don't seem to get it. And so also I kept quiet about things that I saw, just in general in life, how people were with each other. And I did think that there was something wrong with me. I mean, I didn't douse it, it was still there, but I thought, gee, am I the only one who sees things this way? And really later, growing up and realizing that inner sense also is like an inner sight for some people. And later, and I noticed in other people, in helping them become truer to themselves, what they discovered was that they actually have these inner senses that that guide them to help other people and lift their own spirits, and that their perspective can zero in and see what's amiss in someone else's experience. When somebody comes and says, what do you see? I'm going to tell you a story about me. Tell me what you see so I can know more about, how to handle things. So I don't know, there's an inner richness. And I think the more that we talk about it and more people feel better talking about their intuition,
Mm-hmm.
And also sometimes I'm thinking now that intuition has been demeaned in favor of logic. And those are not mutually exclusive things, even though it appears that way. They can be used together. They can be used together. You can have your intuition and direction, and then use logic and, left brain function to make choices, reasonable and wise choices about different situations. So I see it as working together, and it's not either or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And well, you're a very open-minded person, and you're able to look at the bigger picture rather than just narrowing it down. There's one way or the highway kind of thing, or black and white thinking. Yeah. So can you give an example of how How does somebody do logic and intuition and bring it together?
Well, first of all, I think a person needs to appreciate their inner self, which includes your feelings. If you're judging yourself for having too much of this feeling or that, or if you're judging yourself for handling a situation, judgment is part of that ego thing. And it takes on a life of its own until you address it and dismantle it. Because you would need to be appreciating your the innate intuition and get in touch with that. And also appreciate that you have cognitive, logical, common sense type of a thing, because sometimes people are lopsided. They're only appreciating their thinking ability or only appreciating their intuitive ability. And yeah, maybe you have a propensity to more on one side than the other, but we all have elements of all of it. So I think the first thing would be to get in touch with both sides and appreciate it and dismantle limiting self-judgment. When you talked about open mind, it's like, and to know that there's a bigger picture. And, already using centering prayer and periods of silence, if a person can do that right off the bat, that is great, because that, in a way that we can't see, calms our nervous system down.
Yeah.
And some people need to work their way to sitting in silence.
Yes.
And not judging themselves as if it's themselves for interrupting thoughts, and then to find a way to send those thoughts away in favor of sitting in the silence. Yeah. So I see all those things as somehow connected.
Yeah, and it's I'm as a psychotherapist, as since we both are, I use the concept of doing meditation with people all the time. I don't advocate centering prayer to people because that's I think somebody, I mean, that would be pushing, they might think I'm pushing religion, so I don't do that. But I do push meditate. I don't push, but I do advocate for.
Oh, maybe a little.
Do it. I do advocate.
Meditate, everybody meditate.
But I know, but whenever I'm talking to people, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have this, I have that. I incorporate the use of meditation as a practice, and I try to guide people there by telling them, if they've never done it before, just start with 0 to 5 minutes. Don't try to be a yogi and try to do 20, 30 hour that you're going to see on these meditation apps. Just do 0 to 5 minutes. Just do it a few times a week. Because when you're introducing that to somebody, the concept of, sitting still for 5 minutes is a lot easier to consider joining than sitting down and seeing 30 minutes to an hour and they're going, I can't do that. And then the second thing we talk about when they do it the first time is all the chatter that comes into their head. And I talk to them about, I've been meditating off and on now consistently, but in the past off and on for 40 years. And I still have chatter that comes to my mind. And when I read Father Thomas Keating's book and The Cloud of Unknowing, it's obvious that even the monks, the yogis, they have chatter in their mind too. Nobody is perfect. And so it's like with enlightenment, we're striving to get to that silence in that 20 minutes of centering prayer or 5 minutes of meditation. We're striving to get to that place. That's like we are striving to reach enlightenment, to attain enlightenment, right?
And I think that, and there are some of us, and some of you may be watching this, who can't sit still for a second. And if this interests you, you can start, and there's a million things on the internet, relaxation exercises, how to relax your physical body. That's one thing. There's guided meditations, and not all of them are for everyone. So you sample and you find which ones resonate with you.
Yeah.
Certainly you can find Jeannine or me, and we'll help you. And this is something you can find your way, even just having the idea that will be helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or a local person,
Yeah,
your local yoga teacher
Mhm.
or meditation teacher or spiritual teacher or whatever. I think it's so fascinating for me when people do listen and they do try the meditation, and then they come back and they say, wow, that was, it was really amazing. I made my day feel a little bit better after I did that. And I love hearing stories of how people incorporate it in their day, such as a teacher I once worked with. Once all the children left at the end of the day, the classroom, what he would do is he would sit in the classroom and do a meditation before getting in the car and driving home to the next part of his day, which was his family. So I thought that was brilliant. And somebody telling me, a woman saying that she did it in her car in the garage, not with the door
Engine
down.
running, right?
No, not with the door down, but she did it in the car because that was a silent place before going into the house to the chatter of the children,
right,
running all over the place, and the husband and what have you. So that's how she did it. And so I try to tell people things like, when you're taking a lunch break, use 5 minutes of that, because it doesn't take you an hour to eat. Or when you have a coffee break. When I used to work in social services, we would join these walking groups. So we would take our 15-minute break, walk around the neighborhood, come back, and oh my gosh, it was so amazing how you could have a much better day after doing that walking meditation, because you had a chance to just stretch your legs, let it out, get out in the sunshine, because it was California. So get out in the sunshine and come back to your desk, and you just felt like a completely different person. And there's also even like, I had a little book that a person's son gave to me one year for Christmas. It's called Desk Yoga. And that was also a wonderful thing. It's a form of meditation, doing yoga at your desk, that stretching your body in different ways. It helped to make your day go a lot nicer as well.
No, I think that's terrific. Sometimes people come to me and they say, I can't relax at all. And I would say, well, have you ever been on a vacation where you could relax? Oh, on vacation, I can relax. So and there are some people who can't relax even on a vacation. So you want to appreciate where you're at so that you can address and help yourself exactly where you're at. So if you're able to relax on a vacation, then you can definitely build on that.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So, and otherwise you can still learn something new, like people learn how to play the piano. So you start with some principles and you introduce them and you practice them, and then you get better and better at it.
Yeah, well, and that's actually when I'm talking to military people in my office, I'll say, well, don't you remember when you went to boot camp, you were being taught to do something brand new every single day, and you had to practice over and over and over again. You didn't walk in the door and suddenly know how to march. You didn't walk in the door and suddenly know how to use the artillery, or drive the tank or what have you. You had to do a lot of practicing over and over again, and they get it immediately.
Right.
As soon as I say boot camp, it's like, that image is right there in their head, and they get it. Meditation means it's a discipline. It's something that you have to practice doing each and every day. And then you will begin to notice results in your life.
So, and interesting enough that you would bring up the term discipline. So in my life, discipline had a very negative connotation. And as a younger person, so then I attached lots of limiting negative thoughts to the term discipline.
Oh.
When it was brought to my attention that there are many things in my life that I do over and over again because I enjoy them. So that's discipline. So once I took the negativity out of it, I went, oh, it's just doing something over and over again that you just get better and better at. Oh, I could do that.
Mhm.
So that's an example of a person having like a thought attachment to something that kept me from being open to learning some new things. So once I had that awareness, then it opened up.
Yeah, and I think that is what happens when we're in practice as therapists, that there are words that are going to come up all the time that we have no idea people have an attachment to in some negative way. And unless they tell us, how are we going to know?
So for those of you who are viewing this, look at yourselves that way. It's like, what erroneous thoughts do I have? What am I keeping myself from?
Mhm.
And you can ask, and even if you're not in touch with your inner voice or that inner wisdom, you can actually ask a question of that inner wisdom.
Mhm.
It's like, what am I not seeing? What am I not being honest about in myself? And that doesn't mean you're going to find out something awful. It just means you're going to find out something that's like a key that opens up like a little path that can be very soothing and relaxing.
And if you're listening, as you're listening, not if you're listening, because obviously you are, as you're listening, when you're hearing us talking about these words, be open and honest with your therapist, because that's what we're here for. We can't read your mind. You're not visiting a psychic, you're visiting a psychotherapist. And so I love it when people are honest with me and they say, I've had people say, you were too abrupt with me when you brought up that particular topic, and I almost didn't come back. And so then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you did come back. How brave of you to decide, well, I'm going to give her one more chance and I'm going to tell her this, even if they said it in an email, which oftentimes that's how I hear it. But I love it when they come back, because then it's like, this person's ready. They're ready to work. Because the person who disappears and doesn't even tell me that word you said, or the way you looked at me, or that outfit you had on, or even many, many years ago when I first started, a PTSD client, which is what I specialize in, a PTSD client said to me, when you put that clipboard on your lap, it triggers me. They might not have used that word, but they told me, and then they told me a story about it. I mean, it can be anything. And so, you have to really, the therapy session is meant to be a dance between the therapist and the client. I'm not just there for your viewing pleasure. I'm there to work with you. I have to understand, you have to tell me what's happening. I have to be able to decide what does that mean, and I have to work with you on what that means, and we work together. So that's why it's a dance, and that's some terms. Dr. Arnie Mindell, who I love, absolutely love. He's a wonderful somatic psychologist. He talked about getting in the bathwater with the client. So I don't know if I like using that terminology so much. That sounds a little bit too intimate for me, but I love to dance. So I like using the term dancing because it is the way we move around the room verbally is going to make something happen in that session and in the preceding sessions. It's going to change people's life. And sometimes it has to come from their intuitive wisdom, telling us their gut feelings about how they reacted to something that I said, which can then open the door to, well, where do you remember hearing that the first time? Where was the first time somebody gave you that look or had that clipboard or that scent, maybe as a cologne that I was wearing or whatever? Where was the first time that you remember that memory? And then that helps them on their path.
That is a great example, and I have that too. And I have some very brave clients. And so usually I think about them like, wow, all the work they've done is really paying off because they're telling me, and it's hard for them. And then we use that as a springboard for them to realize that they have that courage. And in other places where they would like to speak up, they can. And it's just another place to recognize another level of growth.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's an issue I think a lot of people have. Even and we get the intuition, say this, the thoughts come to us to say, and we don't say them because of all the things in our lives. Either we don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings, or when we spoke up as a child, the other person came down on us, or maybe we witnessed people being brutalized or punished because they spoke up, or it was our perception that that's what was happening. Maybe it was something else that triggered the perpetrator. I don't know.
Or,
yeah.
Or if we say something, they might abandon us.
Right. Yes. So actually, by not speaking up, we're abandoning ourselves.
That's right. Absolutely. We're not staying true to ourselves.
No, we're not. And if you haven't seen our talk on being true to yourself, tune in
to the talk.
That's a good one too.
Yeah, it's an amazing talk. Yeah. So,
what else about intuition? Is there anything else? So if you find yourself at the beginning of appreciating your inner self, then you might want to consult that Be Happy No Matter What book, because it takes you in a very soft way through your childhood situations where you might have been turned away from listening, and how to recover some of that, appreciating it. And then it takes some courage to follow it. First, you need to hear it and accept it, and then to follow it. And then you can find then how you can be different in relationships and situations. You have a lot more command of yourself that way. Also, I did want to mention this. Another way to get to begin to notice that inside yourself, that wise thread or vibration, I don't know what else you might want to call it. And you may have noticed when you were reading something and you get a sense of like, that's something resonating with your inner wisdom. Sometimes you might just get something as a clear yes or a clear no. So it can come to you in a variety of ways, speak to you in a variety of ways. I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and I'll just make a note on that. I was talking to somebody recently about dissociating when I read, and generally it's a psychology textbook, which can certainly trigger us when it's bringing up stuff from our past and what have you. But what I have realized about myself, that when I have to go back and read that paragraph or that page 3 or 4 times, I suddenly say to myself, okay, there's something here that I'm dissociating about, that I'm not wanting to read. And so I've just read this entire page or paragraph or sentence, and I'm not getting it. I can't tell you what I just read. And so now I'll go back mindfully and catch it and highlight it. And I find it. I always find it when I, tune in and say, all right, what do I need to find here when I tap into my higher wisdom? And then I'll see it and I'll be like, oh, now I know why I was dissociating when I saw that sentence or that paragraph. So I'll highlight it, and then that becomes something that I need to focus on in my life, and think about in my life. So that's one thing that I wanted to share about what you just said.
So I just happen to have handy something. This is something I'm reading. It's probably for the 10th time. So for me, at this point, it's like, oh my God, my consciousness is still too dense to take this in. So I'm going to read it again and again because I want to get this.
Yeah.
So, there's that.
Yeah, because if you, and that's something that when I am working with people who have PTSD, although dissociation doesn't necessarily only come with PTSD.
Right. Yes.
So just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. But so when I'm talking about dissociation, I'm talking to people about how to ground themselves and maybe create a log to start with when you find yourself coming out of that dissociation, writing down, I'm here in my house, my husband and I just had an argument, or I'm driving on the road and I was going to Cincinnati and this is what was happening. And just to start them in that process of thinking until they're able to figure out what was it about that trip? What was it about that argument? And of course, with an argument, it's most likely the fear of conflict because it means abandonment. That's an easy one to probably figure out, but it could also mean something else. So I try to have people start by being conscious of when they are dissociating, so that they are able to then reframe that.
How would a person know if they're dissociating?
Well, they know. Oh, okay. It's an autopilot.
Things to share, but what can you say to the viewers?
It's dissociating, and yeah, thank you for snapping me out of my taking that hat off and thinking about needing to explain things sometimes. So when I'm asking people if they dissociate, I generally will say, do you ever have times when you sort of space out or you're on autopilot? You don't quite remember that conversation and you're trying to play along when you're at a meeting or at a party or something, and you're just kind of like, yeah, even though you haven't heard a word they said. That's usually what helps people.
So the other day, I was having conversation with my beloved husband, and I was talking, and he made a comment. it was like, oh, you know what? Either I know that already or something like that, that I could see was totally benign. There was no attitude, there was no anything about it. And the next thing I knew, I could not remember what I was sharing. So so I'm going to say that that's an example. And where I went next was to myself, what did just happen here?
Yeah.
Why did you? And then the words I was telling a friend about, I said, you know what? Gary said something and I shut down. My thinking shut down. And I knew that there was something a little different. I like, it was almost like pulled myself up by my bootstraps because it took all my strength. I went to Gary and I said, yeah, you know what? I know that those things that I was saying to you, you did hear, but that was on my way. It was part of the buildup to what I was going to share with you that I knew that you hadn't heard. This took a lot of strength, Jeannine, and a lot of awareness.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
So, and then, and I was surprised. This was, you know, I have a teacher who calls this inner research. When you go to a therapist, you're consulting with a person who can see some things from the outside, from what you say. Really, you're going because you're doing fine inner research and you're getting help on how to reinterpret things on the inside to either lift your spirits, clear your path, let go of things that have been really troubling, and not personalizing. Even if horrible things have happened to you, that doesn't mean you're horrible. It just means these things have happened and you need to, like, you know, work your way out of sitting in that. But this, I was really surprised, Jeannine, was that, I don't know, whatever the reason was, it was like I got back on track and I could say to him, wait, here, I got the rest of it now. Because when I said to him, I said, I shut down. I was like, I shut down. And he was taking it like he did something to shut me down. So I needed to talk to him while I was processing this. I needed to say, no, 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 no. I don't think you did anything. You said something that maybe was familiar in my life from a time where I needed to run away, not even in the way that he was saying it. So, you know how sometimes you could have a fragrance or a look in someone's eye that triggers you. But it was really, I was very pleased that the memory came back of what I was going to say. And I didn't have to spend a long time. And I think years ago, I would have actually spent time blaming him and seeing it as if it was his fault, not knowing that it was, I'm the one, the feelings are happening inside of me. So.
Well, and so you're talking about a mature relationship where you guys have been through so many things. And of course, if you watch our video, staying true to yourself in a healthy relationship, and how Ellen and Gary evolved over time. So I wanted to bring up something else in regard to intuition and building that intuitive wisdom that we haven't talked about. And that is, I mean, we've sort of glanced around it, but I wanted to give an example to discuss it a little bit more as we end our conversation on this. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a meeting and I was listening to someone talk about their intuition. And they were saying that they were basically saying that their intuition told them not to go to this neighbor next door, to stay away from this neighbor, right? But in reality, what was happening was that it was really their ego was telling them this. And I'll tell you why. because that person prefaced the story by talking about how she didn't like the neighbor. And there was all these things about the neighbor did this and the neighbor did that. And then suddenly she introduced and said, but my intuition told me not to go there. Well, so that's where you have to check yourself when you're using the terms intuition. Is it your intuition or is it your ego? Because it's not a gut feeling when you already have made judgments about something. It's not a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. It is your ego. But the intuition is when something is just not taking you there. And so the difference with that is I lived somewhere in California. I'm not going to say where because of what I'm going to say. But anyway, I was living somewhere in California and there's a bakery that was in the neighborhood. And I always thought, oh, it'd be interesting to go to that bakery. I'd like to check it out. But I never went there. Something kept pulling me away from the bakery. And I could never figure out. I mean, I didn't put much thought into it. But then one day, the owners of the bakery were charged with trafficking and doing some really bad stuff. That's why I didn't want to say the neighborhood. But anyway, because it's very well known. But anyway, so as soon as that happened, and this is what I mean by saying something's telling you to turn right and you don't know why it's telling you to turn right, and you've just got to trust it. Because something kept me from walking in that door over and over again. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, I'd like to go there. I'd like to go there. But something kept walking me from walking in that door. And it's because something not so good was happening there. And I wasn't supposed to be a part of that energy. I just wanted to share those two different scenarios. I've got plenty of others, but I just wanted to stick with two.
So in the first, for me, it would be like to tell the difference between the ego and the intuitive wisdom could be very challenging for a person because they might not be clear yet about the wisdom part. So, they hear the voice part, but they might not be clear about the wisdom part. And so one of the things that I hear you suggesting, which I support for anyone, is to keep questioning. Keep questioning and to use as a guide, the fact that I don't like this person. And so it's okay to accept that you're not going to go over there because you don't like the person. It doesn't have to be mixed up with an intuition.
Yes.
And that, if you can let yourself off the hook in that way, and then let's say you develop a curiosity about that person beyond your judgments of them, and you go to reach out to them and you make some plans with them, but those plans keep getting changed and you never seem to get connected, not just because of you, but because of them, well, then the energy might suggest that you're not supposed to get together with them.
Or it could be that you're being stalled for a reason. Maybe because the two of you are evolving as people, and by the time you are brought together, when that day comes, when you're finally able to get together for lunch, you have both just come to this place in your life where you're ready to meet with each other and start talking where you're at that place versus where you were when you first moved into the neighborhood.
I think that is so brilliant what you're saying, because it brings up the point that there's many possibilities for the situation.
Mhm.
And this is a great thing for any time you feel stuck in a relationship, or in trying to do something, or trying to stop doing something. It's like, if you could just see it in one additional way, if you can open your mind to allow one other possibility, then your mind is open. And
Yeah.
over time, you could consider, oh my God, this is one idea I'm having. That doesn't mean that you're running headlong into the neighbor's house when you may have had reasons to take care of yourself or protect yourself. It just means that you don't want to be limited by any of your own limiting thinking. And that there's always a lot more in a situation than it appears.
Yes.
I mean, that's just a good thing to keep in mind no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Just it's always about trusting your higher power, your God, whatever it is you call it. God is it's about
Sometimes it's called your true self,
your true self, your intuitive wisdom,
your highest thinking, highest wisdom.
and developing that so you are able to discern the difference between ego and intuition, so that you are able to be guided in a direction that is going to be good for you.
And a word that may work for some people, there's developing and cultivating. You know,
Okay.
that's another thing that I found for myself, is sometimes I need to hunt for the word that has exactly the tune in that I can use like a key to get myself to move forward. So that's great.
Okay.
I love what you said.
Thank you.
I've loved this.
Well,
Thanks, Jeannine.
I love these conversations because it's like so exciting to be a part of. And I'm so glad that you wanted to be a part of this. So are we ready to wrap up? Or do you?
Yeah, and I would say, which we've said before, is for those of you who are listening, any conversations like this you can engage in with your friends or family members, and you could and you don't have to agree, just put a topic on the table. You know, we've never talked about intuition, or what's your commentary on relationships? I always like to think everyone is an expert because they've had experiences.
Mhm.
And yeah, go ahead.
And listen to what they have to say and think about it. Don't try to go in with, I'm right and you're wrong. Listen to what they're saying, because that's going to help our world tremendously right now. If we can listen to each other and think about where they're coming from, what their thoughts are about it, and is it possible that they might have something interesting to say, or that their opinion is important, and that validating each other in what we have to say, that's going to help us as a society, as a world, as a community to be stronger, is by listening and not judging, having those moments when we can do that.
Yeah. And if you find yourself judging, you might want to check out how much you judge yourself too. So there's all different angles on dismantling our limitations. So
Yeah, I always
thank
like to
you.
say nobody's right. Nobody's got the right answer and nobody's got the wrong answer. There is no right or wrong, because we're not God. We're not looking over.
We can't see the whole picture.
Right.
So I have my view, you have your view. And if we get enough of us sharing them in an open-hearted way, then we could see how all these puzzle pieces fit together.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you. This has been great.
Okay. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll look forward to talking
Next
to you
time.
again in the future on another
Terrific.
topic.
All righty.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oops. Wait. Stop recording. Okay. Bye-bye.